Here's one. Kid comes in after a fall and gets scraped by some rusty nails. Surprisingly is okay after the fall. We want to give the tetanus vaccine since that's common to do after high risk exposure to make sure she doesn't get it. Learn she's never been vaccinated. Mom refuses. Call CPS but mom is connected to some big shot government official. Kid goes home without vaccine. 3 weeks later, kid comes back in with tetanus, unable to breathe, suffers irreversible brain damage. Now she is wheelchair bound and needs to be fed through a tube. Bet the mom still be not my fault. Standard stuff really. Had a kid on a ventilator with a preventable illness at a major research hospital in California. The mom was anti-vaccine. The kid began to deteriorate and the mom spent a lot of time reaching out to her anti-vax community. One visited her in the hospital and said, "Honey, there was nothing you could do. I lost it at that point." The kid recovered. Before they left the ICU, had a long talk with the mom about vaccines and she agreed to do more research. God, I hope that woman and those like her come to their senses. Nothing you could do except vaccinate your child, which would have completely prevented it. I'm a doc and 2 months ago I'm walking out of the hospital and besides me is a woman, frantically dialing a number on her telephone. She proceeds to start yelling into her phone. They want to put all those nasty chemicals into him. They say if he's going to be in the hospital he needs to be vaccinated to protect other kids. It's poison. I'm going to take him somewhere else. When we got to the sidewalk she immediately reached into her purse and pulled out a cigarette and started smoking. I just stood there watching her yell about poisonous chemicals in vaccines while she puffed furiously on a cigarette. You honestly can't make this shit up. You can't fix stupid. Worked for a credit card company. People blame us for them overspending, like we forced them to buy shit they couldn't afford. I live by the saying, stupidity never ceases to amaze me, because it always is true. Genius has limits, stupidity has none. Veterinarian here. Had a client years ago who bred Salukis and who fed raw, refused most medication cause chemicals bad, and didn't believe in vaccination. One of her dogs was exposed to parvo, and she brought it back to the kennel. She tried to treat it homeopathically herself at first, so by the time we saw it, the dog was already pretty far gone. Then the next day she brought in another sick dog. Then another the next day, 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 then another the next day. All in all, after 6k in bills, 12 beautiful dogs died of a disease she could have prevented for $120. Also a veterinarian got verbally abused the other day for recommending that a puppy be vaccinated because veterinarians are dirty pieces of shit who just like to make money. Client was asked to never come back immediately. So why was that person even there in the first place? To shit on the big bad vet in public in some kinda die in a blaze of glory thing, I guess. After I sent out invites to my kid's birthday party, I found out one of her friends from dance was unvaccinated. My daughter's best friend is in remission from leukemia and is immunocompromised. An unvaxxed kid could kill her. I uninvited the dance kid and very nicely explained the situation. Her mother loses her shit and tries to get us kicked out of the dance school they attend. The dance school owner is an older lady and had no idea there were idiots these days that didn't vax. So she implemented a new rule that students had to be up to date, and the unvaxxed kid had to find a new dance school. I felt bad for the kid, but her mother is a sociopath. Herd immunity saves lives when it comes to kids fighting cancer. I work in a NICU and occasionally float out to the term nursery. Our neonatologists also work as pediatricians in the hospital and see the well newborns on top of the NICU kids. The neonatologist went to see a mom who was refusing the initial vaccines. When the doc told the mom the vaccines were recommended by the AAP and asked for reasons of refusal, the mom laughed and told her to do your research. Research. She told this to a doctor, who is both a neonatologist and pediatrician, double board certified. She also is our medical director, has a PhD in biochemical engineering, and is a mother herself. My eyes nearly rolled out of my head. I'm the research. Not yet. It's vaccination then. Are you threatening me, Master MD? The research will decide your fate. 19-year-old comes on a gurney, deep coma, respiratory depression, foam issuing from the lips. Mother frantic. EEG reveals the pattern typical of subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, a sequela of common measles. It's preventable people, but not curable. They buried him a few weeks later. Yeah, I'd rather my child get sick naturally than be exposed to chemical vaccines. A parent. After I spent 10 minutes describing to her in graphic detail all of the ways preventable diseases could maim and kill her infant. Maybe you should start posting photos around your office of what kids with these impairments look like. Everybody knows what a cemetery looks like. Stupids won't bat an eye. Listen to a baby with whooping cough. You don't need images to be scarred by that shit. My mom did not vaccinate me as a kid. As of 2 days ago I officially have rubella. I have a feeling that in 10 years, we are going to have a lot more stories like yours here. That's if the kids survive though. Student nurse here. The most heartbreaking case I ever saw was a 2 or 3 year old who was facing all 4 limb amputations because he had meningitis and it entered his bloodstream. All because mom didn't vaccinate him. His limbs were completely necrotic, he couldn't eat, had an NG tube, and stopped speaking. You could tell he felt lonely and scared as hell. He got no visitors that I saw, even though he had 8 siblings, and couldn't play with the other kids on the unit because he didn't know how to play without his hands. Crushed my heart. While discussing vaccines with him on one time and bringing up my experience working with the immunocompromised population, she said, "I don't care if someone else's kid has cancer, that's their problem, not mine." And that right there is a huge part of the problem. Selfishness. I vaccinate my children not only for their own health, but for the health of others. So I'm a doctor. My worst experience is always related to parents who don't want to vaccinate their children against STDs like HPV. The numbers of HPV infection rates among sexually active people are off the charts. HPV is related to cervical cancer, throat cancer and other health problems, but every time we tell anti-vaxxers parents to vaccinate their child while they still can, we hear, "This is stimulating kids to have sex." No, it's not. We don't care at all about when your child will have sex. We care about how more than half of the world population has HPV, and how this is killing people. I mean by that logic, seatbelts are encouraging more people to drive drunk. Yeah. The logic. Logic causes autism. No, it turns the frogs gay. Had a patient come to the hospital for possible heart attack. I asked if they had gotten a flu shot or the pneumonia vaccine. They went into a long rant about how vaccines are poison, and they don't take any medication because they swim in the ocean and it purifies all the toxins that they acquire. Then they started having chest pain, so I gave them a nitroglycerine pill. They spat it out because they hated it. Well, you don't take your meds for high blood pressure and high cholesterol, you will have a heart attack. So not just anti-vax, but fully anti-medicine and science. Did you ask them why did they even bother coming to the hospital? They could have just gone to the ocean and swam until their heart attack went away, which it eventually would have. I'm an EMT and pro-vaccine. My ex-wife is an anti-vaxxer. We are constantly arguing about vaccinating my son, but thankfully I have custody of him so he gets his vaccines. She also thinks the government puts fluoride in the water to control our minds. Gotta make the frogs gay somehow. Should tell her that fluoride keeps teeth healthy. If the government really wanted to mind control people, they would do the opposite. That way people would get more metal fillings and they could beam radio instructions directly into your head. I like the way you think. Child A had an absolutely horrible time with chickenpox, to the point that I thought he might not make it. So what does she do? Intentionally expose child B to it. Expose child to disease to prevent them from getting disease later. Vaccines are bad though. Natural vaccinations though. Not a doctor, but I work for a vaccine manufacturer, and my title is raw material engineer, aka I work with vaccine ingredients for a living. When an anti-vaxxer asks me on social media or in public if I know what's in a vaccine, I basically cackle and crack my knuckles. They also don't seem to have an answer for why I give my children the same vaccines if Big Pharma is trying to poison people. Not a doctor, But my 8th grade English teacher was anti-vax and pregnant at the time. She would constantly tell us about how bad vaccines were and stuff. So one day the science teacher spent an entire lesson just talking to us about how vaccines are good and don't cause autism. A few years later I was talking to my friend from 8th grade who still talks to our science teacher, and he said that the English teacher's baby had autism and wasn't vaccinated. Then obviously the doctors had somehow snuck some vaccine into the baby. No. They obviously injected the baby with pure autism just to further the agenda that vaccines are safe. Obligatory, not a doctor, but my dad is an anti-vaxxer. I'm 18. He always tries to convince me not to get vaccines. When I was a kid my mom would have to take me in secret. My dad doesn't know I've gotten vaccines. It's always a secret. Wish I could convince him otherwise, but he doesn't trust any official response.